such termination between May 1st and June 1st of any calendar year, contractor termination period for the remaining term of the contract. In the event contractor does not provide written notice to the town during the contractor termination period, then the agreement shall continue in full force and effect unless until the expiration of the terms of the agreement as further provided in the agreement. Now, obviously, that's a policy decision. It in fact makes, if they wanted it to be from a 3-year contract to a 1-year contract, because it gives them an automatic out, we indicated that, albeit that that's a policy decision when Kathy sent it over, and my other comment was, well, you should ask for the same thing then. But that's an important policy decision. Is it a 3-year contract or a 1-year contract? Kathy reached out to them, and I'll paraphrase the response she got just before the meeting, was that they were concerned, it's a small company, that if there had been a serious illness or a death, that they certainly knew that they would have to fulfill that year's contract, but they wouldn't want to have to, go out and hire people and try to hold the company together if there was a death in the family. Literally, that's the example he gave of him or his brother. He just didn't think that they could or would be willing to want to provide it. Chairman and I were talking, and we said, well, if the company goes under or goes bankrupt or something, there's not much you would do anyway. But the policy decision, are you willing to give them that language, or would you rather go to a 1-year contract then based on the language, or how would, let's just have some general discussion on that. I can tell you the other two are much simpler. One is the contract is ambiguous because it's stated in 3 places, 3 different ways. We need to know who the first person is, and we assume that's the DPW director, but we don't want to make an assumption. But we need that direction tonight. Who's the contact person for the contractor? And then who is the backup if the DPW director is not available if you make that decision? And in the past, it sort of went between the chairman, yourself as the one of the trust supervisors as a DPW liaison, and now we have an administrator, so there would be the potentiality of the administrator. So the 3 policy decisions are whether you're willing to give them the out, who's the first person, the main lead contact person, and again, we're going to assume DPW director because it says that in 2 or 3 places in the contract, but it also says other things, as the chairman has rightly pointed out, and then who's the backup.
Okay, thanks. So let's maybe take those one by one. Let's take the issue of them basically asking for the out, if you will. I'll jump into that. I can't support that as a policy decision if that is simply a provision that is put in place for them and not for the town of Waukesha. I could probably either consider, if it's in for both parties, then is it really a 3-year contract or is it a 1-year contract? We could talk about that at some length. I probably wouldn't be opposed if it was put in for either party to opt out between, was it May 1st and June 1st of any given year? I could do that. I could live with a 1-year contract. I would not support simply giving that option to them without the town having a similar option. Thoughts from anybody else? Let's stay on that issue about their request to have an opt-out.
I would support that. I feel if they have an out, we should have an out also, but also have a 3-year contract.
I'd go along with that too.
Okay, so and again, I don't know, maybe attorney wants to counsel us a bit. If it's a 3-year contract and both parties have an opt-out, I don't know that really is a 3-year, 1-year contract. Is there any downside to it being a 3-year contract with an opt-out after the first year or the second year by either party?
No, some people would probably question if it really is a 3-year contract, but they asked for the 3-year contract, as I've been advised, in order that they could make their planning for the purchase of equipment and things like that. And so I don't know what their response is going to be if we ask for the same thing, but it's not unreasonable to ask for the same thing.
So when I spoke with the business owner, he understood that that the town, if the town wanted to put something in, that was fine with him. He just wanted to make sure that they were covered. He does want to stay with the town. He doesn't have any thoughts about going elsewhere. He just wanted to make sure they were covered if there was something catastrophic happened with one of the two of them, so.
So I guess let's focus on that. Do we want to say, all right, let it be a 3-year contract with an opt-out for both parties, or do you want to simply say make it a 1-year contract?
I'd like to make it a 3-year. I think there's benefits to both sides on a 3-year because, I mean,
Okay.
like I said, they can plan for equipment purchases. We're kind of secure in the position then that we have somebody lined up for 3 years. And as Kathy stated, I understand the catastrophic situation where, you know, they may not be able to fulfill their end of it and would like to be able to bow out of it. I think the dates give us time to find somebody to replace it or make other plans, you know, in
Okay.
town, either to buy another truck ourselves or whatever.
So you're in for the 3-year with an opt-out for both parties?
Yes.
Okay. Mike or David?
Me also.
Mike, you okay with that?
Yeah, as I stated before, I'm okay with that, but perhaps there is some language, and I don't know what it is, that we could put around it that identifies what a catastrophic event is.
And when I spoke with Austin,
Or-
I talked about tightening it up a little bit.
I guess the only thing that I would say about that, and we maybe need advice from attorney, then do they come back and say then there needs to be some boundary definition restriction on which we could opt out? I mean, if it goes this way, you know, I mean, we're back to this thing, kind of what sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander. If it goes together this way, we could opt out just because we chose to do so, and it might be a different, completely different board of people who are sitting here that opt out for whatever reason. I mean, my concern is when you go down that, when we go down that road, if we try to define or constrain that, then they can certainly come back the other way.
I think that would be reasonable, but we're trying to sign what is a 3-year contract with a company that we've been happy with, that provides both an out for the business owner and an out for the town that's fair and equitable for what they've identified as a catastrophic event. I think that's reasonable. I want to work towards a level of trust that we don't cancel because we found it for cheaper for $25 an hour somewhere, or $10 an hour, or something of that nature. And likewise, I don't want them to be able to cancel because they found another municipality that they can just, you know, flat out get more money for. So this is just a suggestion, that's all it is. Perhaps our staff can come up with some tightening language on both sides that further define on both sides what a catastrophic event is. I am not entertaining the fact that we would tighten it up and then only have it on one side.
I hear you, what you're saying. One of my deep concerns, and again, the words that you spoke, I think are very true in terms we've had a very successful working relationship with this contractor. I think that's fundamentally true. My concern is we're sitting on September 26, 2019, and we don't have any kind of an agreement with them. I'm all about trust and good faith, but I think we need to lock this thing down tonight. I don't think we can afford to go another meeting or what or not without doing it.
We're not gonna vote on a contract tonight, are we? I mean, we don't have a contract.
Well, I certainly hope we're giving sufficient direction parameters that we're not sitting here a month from now talking about all kinds of different language to insert and whether they'll accept it or what or not about catastrophic thing. I mean, I think we're kind of I frankly think we're kind of out of time to do that. That's my point of view. Anybody else?
Is this something we can put back on the agenda for the April or May meeting next year? And-
We need a contract now.
Right, I mean, for the next year's contract, not, it'd be a 2021 contract then.
But then we're back to just making a 1-year contract instead of a 3-year.
So we could, if you direct Attorney Macy and myself, I'm sure we can come up with the contract for the final vote on the 10th.
I'm fine with that. I guess my concern is, the contracts, you can put any kind of language in you want. Somebody's gonna find a way to get around it if they really want to. So, I mean, to sit and put specifics, I don't know. I don't think it's gonna work. I mean, I'm just fine to go ahead and write a contract up here and then not, and we have to trust one another to a point, so that's my feeling on it. But if you can come up with specific language and everybody's happy with it, that's fine.
Okay, did we air that out sufficiently? You got
My
that?
notes
Just-
are that it has to be quid pro quo. If they want it, we want something similar. I have notes that it has to be catastrophic. We have to define that. It could be the inability of either of the partners to be able to work the business or closure of the business, or the town decides to bring the business in-house, or they're not satisfactorily performing. We would narrow the reasons, and cost cannot be a reason to terminate. Those are just my quick thoughts.
Sounds good to me.
Everybody okay with that? Mike, you okay?
Yep.
All right, let's try that. Second item then, and again, the draft of that has all kinds of conflicting language, and some of that goes back 8 or 9 years or whatever. We basically need to know, and the contractor needs to know who they're communicating with at the town of Waukesha, I think both in, I'll call them emergency situations where they need an answer directive to something on the spot, and it may be even some of the things that are not quite such an emergency nature. I think one of the things that's consistent in the document is that the first contact or take direction from the DPW director, Jerry Noley. Does anybody take exception to that, that's the primary or first point of contact?
It should be the first point, I feel.
Okay, then we agree to that. Then where we've got a lot of different alternatives is the second thing, and I'd submit the way, regardless of what that contract said, and might have had that conflicting language in it. I think as long as we've had workmen on board, Mike, you've been the second point of contact, the second liaison, the backup, or what or not. Are you interested or willing to continue to do that?
That would be fine with me. I was gonna make the suggestion that it be the administrator, since that's the chain of command, but if we would prefer to have it be a board member, then that's fine with me.
My concern, and it's not a personal type of thing, but in as much as you are here, you live in the town, you've established that working relationship and everything, from my point of view, I think that would be preferable. I mean, there's one rendition of that says that it's supposed to be the chairman, one rendition of it says Chairman Merrick. Well, that's yesterday's news type of thing. We're not going there. I don't have a particular need to be thrust into that position or what or not. We're trying to share some of the load if you'd be willing to do that, and unless Supervisor Stigler or Supervisor German has a different thought, I'd be good with you continuing. Any thoughts?
If he's done it before, I'm fine with it.
I'm fine also with,
Okay. I don't think we need to take any formal action on it, but you know
Does it
then how
have
that needs to be
titles?
cleaned
Don't
up.
Put names in again. Is he the supervisor who serves as liaison to DPW?
Sure, you can just call him the town supervisor, who's the liaison. He's basically going to be the second point of contact after the DPW director.
Okay. got it.
Okay? All right, we all on board with that? So we're going to try to get this cleaned up and get it back on the 10th of October. I mean, you might, I'm not suggesting you need to do it, but if there's some of these things that are still hanging in the air, what or not, you could even, I mean, we're not going to be negotiating here, obviously, but you might even invite one of the workmen or what or not to be here, what or not, if there are questions. We need to expedite this and move it forward. We're not going to be negotiating it, but we need to get it done. Okay? Is everybody good with that? Okay, then we'll move on. Item 9F is discussion and possible action on the contract for police patrol services between Waukesha County and Town of Waukesha, and we have again several representatives. Why don't you come forth, if you would, and self-introduce. We know one of you guys pretty darn well, and the other one not so much. Why don't you self-introduce, and then we'll proceed with discussion,
Yeah,
please.
just for the record, Captain Mark Moonen. I'm Josh Jost, I'm the business manager with the Sheriff's Office.
Welcome, thank you. Okay, where would we like to start? Do we want to start with your review of that, Attorney Macy?
Sure. I have many, many points. If you want to go through them one at a time or address questions, or, the first one dealt with, reviewing paragraph 1 to make sure that it is accurate. Obviously, I wouldn't know that, but it probably is. Everyone know it?
We looking at the contract or at your?
I'm going to talk about my letter. You can just have the contract.
Okay.
I just have to make sure that it accurately describes the 3 p.m. to 11 p.m. and 5 days laid off for the rest of it. And all of that is what you can do, correct? Okay. Number 2, I understand that having the town of Waukesha's name on the quad is significant to the town. Please look at section 3B and make sure that it adequately states, 3D, I stated that wrong, what you intend in that regard. All vehicles furnished by the county under the contract to secure the identified market, the sheriff's department will also bear the name of the municipality. Is that adequate for you?
I think so. Anybody see that differently?
Payment terms is the biggest problem, of course, and that's one of the ones that you were concerned about. 4B refers to an attachment of several tables, none of which were provided. The numbering of the tables that are referenced, moreover, suggests there are numerous additional tables in the attachment that are not described in the agreement, so I have no knowledge of what the entire agreement may contain. And then you have to, I can't assure that the costs outlined in attachment 1 are in accordance with your intent, or even if they are clear and unambiguous.
Just a thought here, do we want to pause and have a response to each one of these, or do you want to go through all of them? What's the most efficient way to do this?
Oh, we have to pause, we'll get way.
I think so, we'll get too deep.
So
Okay, would you address that, please?
The attachment is normally sent when the contract comes through. I did send the attachment in an email, I want to say about a week and a half ago.
And you have it in your packet.
Along with the response. So there, the attachment is then in the packet then. So there is detail for each section. I'm willing to address each section, but each section is in the packet as well.
And that's I think that's under cover of your email communication of is it 17th of, or is it one beyond that, 18th of September, does that sound right?
That sounds correct.
Okay. Have you seen that yet or not? To you, Attorney Macy?
I'm sure I saw it in the packet.
Okay.
But I would still have to defer to all of yours, to yourselves, I don't decide policy.
No, I understand. I
Makes
understand.
sense to you, and it's what you've negotiated.
The attachment is the same form, same calculation as in prior years.
Okay. Do you want to make a comment? Go ahead.
So one of the questions that I had, usually when we do a contract, we have a 5-year contract, 3-year contract. You just heard us talk about the 3-year snowplow contract. We know exactly what we're paying all 3 years when we sign that contract, or they sign the contract. In this case, every year you change the numbers. Is there any reason why we can't have a flat fee for the 5 years? You're asking us to do a 5-year term contract, but not giving us any amounts.
Correct. So the calculation is based on our adopted budget, and year over year that changes and can change in different areas. It can go up and can go down. This current year from 2019 to 2020, there were significant increases in what the county is paying for the WRS contribution for protected services. So this is a significant driver within our budget. So this is something that we don't want to be subsidizing the town, and we also don't want the town subsidizing us. We want this to be as accurate as possible. So this is something that, if it is, it's based on our adopted budget. We can, if things go up, if they go down a little bit in certain areas, you know, as you see, I believe
Do we have any protection in that contract that states that the
There-
percentage won't go over a specific amount? I mean, because we're giving you carte blanche, we're signing a contract for 5 years, and you're going to be able to tell us what it is every year, something different.
And I don't want to say, it's not essentially a carte blanche. It is based on specific calculations, formulas. There is also a piece of language that we inserted into the contract per your request that does give you the ability to opt out of the contract if there are financial troubles, or if there are, again.
If we pay for everything. If we
No.
pay for everything.
No, there was a, no,
The squad and the employee, if you can't find another spot for the employee, don't we have to pay for all of that, the way I read
the squad was
contract?
not, part of that language.
But we have to pay for the squad if we go for the 5-year, whether we cancel or not. I mean, the administrator's right. I don't know of anybody who enters into a contract where they have no idea what the payment might be in the second, third, fourth, and fifth year.
Historically, the payments have gone up anywhere between 2% and 3%. This year, they have gone up between 2019 and 2020 among the contracts who are doing like service, exactly the same service from 2019 to 2020. The contracts went up slightly over 3%, but that was because of operational increases on our part, and we also decreased, we eliminated the transcription billing, which is a separate contract that we have done in the past for transcription services. So instead of a typist typing out a report, all of our deputies are using a dictation software called Dragon that increased our operating costs, but it decreased the transcription costs. So we were able to cut positions in our 2020 budget, and to partially offset that, again, we're saving money. The contracts, again, who went from exactly the same service from 2019 to 2020, if you include the transcription, which we usually don't, it comes out to somewhere between 1.5% and 2% for an increase year over year. So this is, again, it's based on historical charges. We haven't gone up anywhere over, I think, 3.5% in any given year. And my understanding of the language that was added to the contract for an opt-out was simply based on financial duress. And it did not include having to pay for the entire cost of the vehicle if that clause is invoked. Essentially what happens is, if we are unable to find a position if we have to lay anyone off, essentially, due to the contract termination, the town would be liable to pay for any unemployment costs that we would have to, unemployment insurance costs that we would have to pay for. With the town, that is very unlikely, as there is 1.19 FTE and generally one person. So if the town were to not contract with the sheriff's office, we would unfund 1 FTE, which we almost always have at least 1 vacancy in the sheriff's office. Again, I can't say for certain, but the goal is not to terminate anybody. Most of these situations are for larger contracts. We have 2, I would say, very large contracts with the Village of Sussex and the City of Pewaukee, where the number of people that we would have to lay off in those situations is high, and might get, and would probably get to that point.
Mr. Chairman,
Sure.
So, given all of that and the consequences to the town, should we opt out? It's my understanding that over the 5-year period, we pay for the full cost of the vehicle, right?
That is correct.
But there's provisions and wording very specific that the ownership and the right to use the vehicle elsewhere is at the full discretion of the county.
That is correct.
So given the fact that we're carrying the full weight of the vehicle, how is the town compensated should that vehicle be needed elsewhere?
What do you mean by needed elsewhere?
Well, if you're gonna use the vehicle to go patrol some other area like the town of Vernon, or for part of the shift, the deputy is called away to the town of Brookfield, I mean, the language says you have the right to use the equipment in other locations if that's necessary, right? Isn't that the one we just read? Right, so if the county chooses to use the squad that the town is paying for in full in somewhere other than the town, how is, if at all, the town compensated for that?
I guess I can speak to that. The town squad, when not being used by the deputy that's working the contract, is parked here and it's not used by any other sheriff's department employee. To speak to your addressing of maybe going to Vernon to patrol, that's not necessarily what would happen. If she or he, whoever deputy's working for the contract, would be called on a mutual aid basis, it'd be no different than one of the town's fire apparatus leaving to go assist a neighbor.
Okay, but I'm not so concerned with what we're talking about usually happens. What I'm concerned about is that it says that as a town supervisor, I have to pay for the full weight of the vehicle, but that you can pull it back at any time for no compensation. I mean, it goes back to the one-sidedness of the contract that we talked about in the snowplow contract. I mean, just like you said, when it comes to, you know, one of the reasons that you can't give us a price for out years is that your prices change, and you don't wanna subsidize us, and I understand that, and you wanna make sure that we're not subsidizing you. But that same train of thought doesn't seem to carry over to the vehicle.
The vehicle, if for whatever reason, and again, we're talking in an extraneous circumstance here, if the town vehicle were to be somewhere else, and on a day where there was somebody in the town, the county would provide a different vehicle. So this happens when the vehicle is broken, needs to be fixed, the vehicle goes in. If it's a day when there's a deputy that's supposed to be here, they will be in a different vehicle, just in Waukesha County Sheriff's Department, Tahoe, and they will still be patrolling as well. So again, I'm not seeing this, I guess I'm not seeing the circumstance that.
But you do agree the document says, not as the deputy has indicated, which may be what has happened, you have the right to take that vehicle whenever we're not using it and using it anywhere in the county you want to use it. The contract says that.
Yes.
Okay, that's all.
That, you know, that's what it says.
Yeah.
So they can say, what a waste, we've hit, 6 deer, we got 6 vehicles out, damaged, and we need a vehicle, and it's sitting in Waukesha and it's not being used, we're gonna pull that vehicle and use it. You have every right to do that.
I can speak to that. As far as reading that black and white, I don't disagree with that, but the reality of that is not happening. The town of Waukesha squad that's parked here is not the first choice to be pulled into service should there be a shortage of squads. If you read that black and white, I'm sure that's the way it may read, but the reality of it is that's not what is happening.
Board will have to decide what they wanna do about that, I mean, necessarily. Sure, the administrator said, can it be removed? I mean, we might as well stay, it's not next on my list necessarily, or I guess maybe it is. Well, next is the obvious, there's no number in 4A, we gotta have a number before we can have a contract. Can't enter into a contract till we know the number. But the next one I said, you're required to pay the cost of the vehicle if provided at the service. The term is not defined. Is there a reference to the acquisition cost? Does not include maintenance? the administrator has concerns and has been dealing with the sheriff's department as to why don't we get the vehicle if we paid for it for 5 years? And why don't we get to sell or use the vehicle? Why do they get the vehicle? If we paid for it fully.
Let's just back up to 4A for a minute. When is that number coming?
So the number is not absolutely final until, like I said, it's based on our adopted budget. I do not see the dollar amount changing from the amount that I have, the amount that I sent in a prior letter, the $172,000, $172,041. I do not anticipate that changing, but if there's a county board supervisor who decides to amend the sheriff's office budget, it could possibly change the number ever so slightly. Again,
Okay, I guess
very
maybe
small.
make it incredibly simplistic. I mean, before we execute this, I'm assuming there's a number that gets plugged into 4A?
Yes, before the contract is executed, there will be a number in 4A.
And when do you anticipate that would be available?
The county board adopts the budget at the end of November. So as the day that happens, that number would be available.
Okay, I didn't mean to interrupt the thrust of where you were headed.
Well, I'm on number C and the whole issue behind the vehicle.
Sure, understood.
Let me understand this. I mean, I kind of, we're supposed to approve a contract tonight, the way I understood it is on the agenda here, but we don't have a number? And we're not gonna get one until November?
Correct.
So
So,
as a board here, I mean, it's a very, puts us in a very bad situation to be in, you know, to go ahead and say, let's write a blank check here, you know, I mean, I'd like to have a concrete number before I start approving a contract, and I'm pretty much pro-contract for the sheriff's department here, but I assume we had a number here already. I really kind of surprised to see all these X's on here.
again, the odds of the number changing are slim, less than 1%. But at the same time, because all of the contracts are based on our adopted budget, we have to go that route.
I mean, could we at least get a not to exceed number or something? I mean, I think the whole principle is here, just as a business type of thing, is we just can't sign something that's open-ended. I mean, I understand the assurances that you're trying to give us tonight, and I'm not questioning the credibility or anything of it at all, but just from a business point of view, sit on our side of the table to sign something that doesn't have a number in it. I mean, is there a way?
I mean,
If,
I would
you're
even-
sure you're within 1%, is there a way to even, if this needs to be executed, get a not to exceed or something?
I would be comfortable with the not to exceed of the $172,041. If there is a modification to our budget, it would likely decrease the cost ever so slightly. That is the
Okay.
most likely scenario.
So when this is couched in terms, I think, of per month, I mean, that's the annual thing, so I mean, we could basically say it's, or I mean, you could change that per, shall pay monthly, but based on 172,041 for 12 months not to exceed, or what or not? I mean, would that, Supervisor Stigler, I mean, would that allay your concerns?
Yes, I have a problem with not knowing amounts when you approve a contract, so I guess I would never sign a contract if it was not an amount there, but,
Just a reminder, that's only for the first year. So the other 4 years, we have
well, I
no
guess
numbers.
that's nothing new. That's the way the contract's always been, correct? I mean, there's variances, like you said, with expenses and stuff like that. It's not concrete in anything, but is there a way to put a limit on the percent increase per year?
A limit on the percent would be, again, depending on what the percentage was, would create a situation like in 2019 into 2020 where we were able to create some efficiencies and cut a few positions while adding the Dragon software. It increases the operational cost for us, but it completely eliminates the transcription cost, which is a separate contract, so,
I'm all for it going down.
and essentially, it's about a 1.5% to 2% increase this year, which, if you include the transcription, which is one of the lowest it's been over the last, I would say, 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, I haven't been privy to the,
No, and like I'm saying, so I would not personally, I would not be comfortable with a limit. If there are large increased expenses, the county has to cover it then. We have to eat that cost.
so then at that point, we could opt out. If we felt it's too high.
Right, but we don't
cost.
have an opt-out. Right, yes, exactly, yes, that's when you would,
Anybody in the world who enters into contracts like this?
City of Waukesha,
No, I'm talking.
no, sorry, City of Pewaukee, these contracts are.
Waukesha County comes in and says, you can contract with us, but we're not gonna tell you what you have to pay until the end of November every year. Have you ever bought anything that way?
So we hand out, or we send out in July an estimate, and my goal is to make that estimate as accurate as possible. That's when we are preparing our budget. And over the last, I think, 6 years, that estimate has, the estimate has never gone up from when we give the estimate in July to when the contract is signed. It has always been the same, or it has decreased, depending on the county board, the county executive actions to our budget.
And I guess I can speak to that. The goal of the contract is to be entirely 100% fiscally responsible in the sense that you're not being asked to sign a 5-year contract that has a one-time price, because if the cost to the service provider, would go down, that means there's a profit in that. There's no profit in the way that the sheriff is sending out this contract. It is actual cost. The sheriff is not looking to make anything off of that. I know you referenced, Mr. Macy, the snow plowing contract. Should their costs go down, that increases their profit. That world is not what the sheriff's department contracts under. We are an actual cost contract. There's no profit to be made in the sense of fluctuations up or down in actual operating costs.
Is the number that you're quoting, the 172,041, is that an all-in? Is that the squad? Is that the equipment? Is that
That is everything, yes, sir.
for the officers' equipment, everything that's mentioned in this contract?
Yes, yep.
Is there a way to,
And I apologize for 1 second. There is, so overtime is billed on a separate actual cost basis. I believe the town's overtime is generally very low, however, but it's based on actual usage of overtime.
is there a way for second, third, fourth, and fifth years, is there a way to cap that out with the NTE? So the thing isn't just completely open-ended. I mean, the discussion we're having here, this is not, and don't take it, don't be offended by the fact, I mean, this isn't about intent, it isn't about, it isn't about credibility. I mean, it rings, and I'm supportive of this, and it's not ringing hollow to me at all that you're simply trying to extend this at your cost and not make a profit and everything. I hear every one of those words. The concern is just from a business perspective of signing something that's open-ended. And I mean, that sounds wrong because it sounds like it's questioning somebody's intent, and that it isn't that. But just from a business point of view, can you see how that puts us in an awkward position?
I do, and I think, I was hoping that the language that we inserted into the contract about if essentially if there's any financial, issue with the contract, if it goes up too much for the town, essentially there is a period where you can opt out of the contract in that given year. And again, not paying for the remaining portion of the vehicle, only paying for if we were to have to lay somebody off, the unemployment for that person until we were able to either rehire them or we stopped paying the unemployment for whatever reason. But again, a very unlikely scenario.
I mean, just to lay all the cards on the table, I mean, we're a town board of 5 people now. When somebody says, geez, if it goes up too much, there's an opt-out. I mean, that may well be in the minds of 5 different people and the people who are sitting here. You understand what I'm saying? I mean, we could sit there and say how much is too much. We could all talk about that individually tonight and have a different opinion. That might be quite different than
And that
somebody who comes who is simply looking at that as an excuse or a lever to pull to get out.
And that would be up to the town board then. And like I said before, we don't have the opt-out. We don't want or need necessarily an opt-out. We want to do, we want to be the police services for the town of Waukesha.
All right, so we were talking about this opt-out phase. 11C states that the municipality encounters financial issues. In the event the municipality encounters financial issues, just as Supervisor or Chairman Fisher stated, there's really nothing that addresses what financial issues would be. My concern is that you just told us that we would get your numbers in July, but we have to opt out by June. So
We can modify the date. I'm okay with modifying the date to after we get the numbers. So I would say modifying the date to
August.
August 1st, because our budget is, we will get, usually by mid-July is when we have a very solid number for what the next year's contract will cost.
Okay, it overlaps, so I wanted to
Yep.
clear that up.
Thank you.
On the other, another
So
thing.
that's just real quickly, not to interrupt, but that, then is that 11B, the June 1st thing?
I was reading C, where they were telling us our financial
Oh,
issues.
all right, I see that there. Okay.
But
I
it's
see
still
that
gotta be
appears there
cleared up,
both places.
because all B says is you can cancel a 5-year contract. It doesn't say you can contract even in the new C on a year-to-year basis.
Well, I would assume if you're canceling the contract that it would mean that we wouldn't be I'm sorry, I guess I don't understand.
Well, Kathy's concerned about the date in B. B has nothing to do
No, I
with
said-
termination.
I said C. I said C. I read C. In the event it encounters financial issues, and then it says that it has to be in writing by June 1st. They stated that they weren't gonna get us the numbers till July. That doesn't help us on opting out. And as we were just talking about the opt-out feature, the C is different than B.
You do have he's got it. There's two C's in the document I've got, is that it?
Okay, yeah, yeah, there's a C and a D, yeah.
And he
So the
he
first
doesn't
C,
have a
I was
June
talking about the
1st.
first C.
Yeah, but he doesn't have, the addition he's got doesn't have a June 1st at the end of the first C. Is that complicated enough? That's different than this?
Yeah, there's 2 Cs here.
I was reading this C.
So,
Oh, I'm sorry, you do have it there, okay. 2 Cs, he's got the same one.
okay, so, the other area that, we started talking about was the town pays 100% of the cost of the vehicle, but then the county gets to keep the vehicle after the 5-year, payments are up. After the town pays 100% of it, then you take it back and sell it. And how are we compensated for that? The amount that you sell the vehicle for, or turn over the vehicle to the town if,
So currently,
After we pay.
and I apologize, I'm going to go into a brief explanation of the Waukesha County's vehicle replacement plan. In order to, how the plan works is initially to get a vehicle in the vehicle replacement plan, the county has to purchase the vehicle entirely. So how our charges come to us are, we purchase a brand new Tahoe, it gets used, and then say it's replaced every 5 years. We pay, on top of the fact that we just paid for that vehicle, it goes into the plan, we pay 1/5 of the cost of that vehicle each year until it gets replaced. So part of a very small portion, and the charges that, the charges you see every year are the current cost of the Tahoe with a small dollar amount for sale. As the previous town vehicle was a Crown Vic, we were getting very, very small dollar amounts for those vehicles. We also don't have much, if any, sale history for a five-year-old Tahoe now. The town's will be a 6-year-old Tahoe, so we're not expecting to get a lot of salvage value for those vehicles. I think we were getting, for the Crown Vics, we were getting $1,000 or $2,000 at the end of their useful lives. The 5- and 6-year Tahoes, we're expecting a little bit more, but we don't have history yet. So there is a small dollar amount in the contract. I believe it's, I wanna, get it right here. Current residual value is about $3,000. Again, with the amount of maintenance history that the current vehicle has, we would like to see what it ends up selling for and modify the residual value for going forward. And again, on an annual basis, there is the 1/5 cost of a Tahoe minus the residual value, and then the useful life of the equipment attached to the vehicle. So a light bar, all the lights on the inside, sirens, push bar, those all have useful lives. Those are all things that get charged to the contract that are attached to the vehicle. So that's kind of a brief explanation of how we charge and how the vehicle works. So there is a small dollar amount in there for that, but like I said, at the same time, we don't have a history for selling those vehicles. So you're paying for the vehicle, but there is a residual that you are getting.
Contract, I had asked you to put together our current vehicle, and we purchased the vehicle, you acquired the vehicle for $27,000, $27,600. And then the
ballistic
panel was added to it.
That is part of our
well,
vehicle
so-
replacement plan. The panels are in that portion of it, so that's why it's included in there.
Right.
And it is
So-
not included in the other vehicle costs.
So the total cost of the acquisition was $29,000, but then the town cost that we paid was $30,100, though the vehicle acquisition cost was $29,000. And then you walk away, you keep the vehicle afterwards. Now, when it comes to our maintenance, it states that we paid maintenance up to $29,000, and the county paid $30,000 in maintenance, roughly.
Correct, and that amount is still increasing. Usually when we take a Tahoe out of service, it'll cost us about $800 or $1,000 to strip the vehicle, mostly in labor costs. So that amount will eventually rise. That amount will rise through the end of the year and into next year, depending on when the current vehicle is replaced.
So nobody has a question about why our maintenance is is the same amount of a 5-year car?
Well, maybe just give us an idea how those maintenance costs come to be. Can you give us some insight, please?
Yeah, a portion of it is the initial setup, so that's going to be a lot of labor. Most of that is labor for setup because you're moving things from one vehicle to another. A large portion of it's going to be tires, brakes. if there's anything wrong with the vehicle, if there is a minor accident where the vehicle does have to get fixed, you know, or there's some damage for whatever reason, that's also in there as well. Over the 6 years, it's not a very terribly high maintenance vehicle. We see this, to be honest, we spend a lot of money on maintenance every year. I think our total fleet, which is mostly Tahoes, we spend right around $400,000 or so on vehicle, just the maintenance of vehicles.
But if
So,
an accident happens during the year, we don't get charged.
correct,
The price is the all-in.
correct, it's all in. If there's a major accident, we're replacing the car, if it needs to be a brand new car, we're replacing the car.
Right. But that's part,
Correct.
as part of the package, we
Correct.
pay the insurance on the car.
Correct.
So
Yeah.
the insurance is paid through,
Correct.
By the
insurance
town.
will pay for, yeah.
Are you, with your fleet, you're typically rotating those vehicles through there on a 5-year basis? Is that any different than,
Most of our
This
vehicles
one?
are 2-year vehicles. They're running 24/7, 365. They build up about
Oh.
100,000 miles or so in 2 years, and then we,
on that amount of mileage, 2 years you're rotating them out? All right, and what is your, and you've got some service history on this, what is your anticipation for the town of Waukesha if we do this contract, that the amount of mileage that gets accumulated over a 5-year portion of the contract, just a guesstimate?
5 years, probably right around that 100,000, maybe a little bit more.
Okay,
One thing we did from year 5 of the last contract to current year, which is a 1-year contract, is the mileage at the time we thought was lower than what we had anticipated, because we went from a 7-day-a-week contract to a 5-day-a-week contract. So there was savings in 2019 where there were no fixed vehicle charges. If there's an opportunity to do that again as the vehicle ages, you know, we're obviously more than willing to look at those things.
okay, thank you. Other questions?
Well, we're running through the letter, and we dealt a lot with the equipment and got clarification that it's an all-in amount. I'm on F unless somebody has questions. I don't think they're gonna cap, you know, the amount, but I think it's clarified that that is the amount for the at least 12-month period, so. Then they said and indicated, and I assume it's okay with all of you, that the only charge that might come to the town, other than the number that's determined at the end of November, is the overtime.
Correct.
Thank you for that clarification, that's F. G is a little concerning because, and I assume what you're referring to in the new paragraph, which the board may still want to revise slightly, is that if our personnel is not the one laid off because of seniority or union reasons, bargaining reasons, we still pay for the lowest person that did get laid off.
That is correct. Again, like I said, it is very unlikely that happens with the town, but it is something that we have in all of our contracts, and I don't believe we would be willing to eliminate that clause.
I just have to make sure the board understands, it's not if your person gets laid off, it's if any person gets laid off because you terminated the contract.
And like Attorney Macy said, it's because of the town. It's not just if anybody gets laid off it's if the town terminates the contract.
Right.
That is the preceding event here, essentially.
But originally, I think they thought, well, if they terminate and they can't find a place for our person, then we have to pay it, but that's not what came back. And I'm not criticizing it, I certainly understand it, and I want to make sure I understood it, that's why it's written the way it's written. Because the person that's working for you may have seniority and be able to, you know, somebody else gets terminated or gets laid off because of the rank or situations. So then there's some minor changes, but I don't know, I'll go back to Kathy as to whether the administrator has any other policy decisions the board needs to make.
The biggest concern I had was the fact that we didn't have an amount for 5 years. We kind of talked about that a little bit with the snowplow contract. You know, is it really a 3-year contract? Should we go back to a 1-year contract? Then we don't have to worry about giving notice or terminating of personnel and having that cost assessed to us. You guys went to a 1-year, or the former board went to a 1-year term last year. I was concerned about the cost of the vehicle. We're paying the cost of the vehicle, but then we don't possess the vehicle, and he explained that to you, why that is. So those were the policy decisions that I had for you.
So the first policy decision, Mr. Chairman, has already been made once, but the administrator said, are the 4 of you still of a mind to go with the 5-year versus the 1-year based on this discussion?
Which is a good question. My answer is yes. Any of the 3 of you?
My answer's still yes on the 5-year.
Yes, also.
Are we anticipating voting on this tonight in a final form?
The action would be to approve it satisfactory
Yes,
to the,
satisfactory to the staff.
or the chairman, and in an amount of not to exceed exceed 100 and, I'd say 175,000 maybe, just to be safe. You know, they're at 172,041. He said you were gonna do a cap.
I think he already said 170.
He said they,
2041.
he said they do it at the 172,041.
Very confident.
Okay,
Like
so,
I said, if there's any changes, it would
right,
go
just,
down.
just to cycle back, you capped it at the 172,041. I know we mentioned it, I don't remember if you committed. Did you commit to a maximum increase year over year of 3% moving forward?
No,
Okay,
again,
I just
no.
want to make sure, that's all.
There are changes to the contract that we are gonna request. It's got to be clear in my mind, in reading this and having others read it, there's all these costs, but nowhere, and maybe they can point it out to Kathy when they work with her, does it say that the sum in 4A includes all of those other monies other than the overtime? And I think we have a right to make sure that that's clear, that's what they're saying. I have a few other technical changes, as you'll see on the page 3, but that's the biggest one in my opinion. If you're of a mind policy-wise to approve it, we just gotta make sure that's clear that we're not getting any other bills.
I am okay with the modified language to say that the sum in 4A is all inclusive outside of the overtime billing.
And we are gonna modify the dates in such a fashion that we'll know our costs prior to our opt-out date.
Correct. We'll do, I believe, August 1st. I will have a solid number mid-July. That will be,
Okay, then
again, a very,
Then I'm comfortable with the 5-year.
Okay, so we'll get those things cleaned up. We've got 4 that are in for the 5-year. Okay, then we want to continue with the rest of the clarification or cleanup items?
Well, I think the administrator can work with the representatives. She's got our letter. They can get our letter. They can come back with a revised draft. She'll reach out to whomever, the chairman or myself, as she sees fit. And so the motion would be to approve the contract, subject to the same being a place form satisfactory to the town administrator, with a dollar amount not to exceed 172,041. And if that dollar amount exceeds that, it would have to come back to the board. That's all it says.
Sure.
That'd be the recommended language if the board's comfortable with that.
Would someone like to make the motion to that effect?
I'll so move that.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, motion by Supervisor Stigler, second by Supervisor German. Further discussion? Before we vote, gentlemen, anything more that you need to add to the discussion?
No, thank you for the cooperation.
Okay.
And we're-
Does everybody understand the motion then? All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
That approved unanimously, 4-0. Thank you for your time and the information you provided tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you, Board.
Okay, item 9G, discussion and possible action on Collins Engineering Agreement for 2019 routine bridge inspection on Bridge ID-P-67_50 on Big Bend Road in Mill Creek. The cost of the inspection is $1,100. Now you've got information in your packet. Administrator Nicholas, you want to just backfill that a bit, please?
Mrs. Nicholas, okay. The, Mr.
I called
So-
you Mr. Nicholas.
Yes, Administrator Nicholas, yes. Collins has done our bridge inspection for years. As this is a new board, I thought I'd bring it forward. It is a low-cost contract of $1,100. They do a fine job getting it to us in time for us to have it sent to the state. So I ask for your approval.
Is there a motion to that effect?
I also move.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? I don't think we need to belabor that any further. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that was unanimous, 4-0. My apologies to you. Okay. 9H, discussion and possible action on the selection of a consultant for Phase 1 environmental site assessments, ESAs, for the properties located at W239S3881 Big Bend Road, State Trunk Highway 164, and W239S3899 Big Bend Road, State Trunk Highway 164. You have, I believe, copies of 4 proposals in your packets, and Kathy put together a simple summary sheet of the proposal amounts. They were solicited from 5 companies or 5 firms, 4 of which responded. This is Phase 1 environmental site assessments. Any discussion on that? I would just tell you my review of these. I do not believe that they can be differentiated between them in terms of scope of service or whatever. I would think, if you're inclined to move ahead on this, that it would be appropriate to contract with the entity that provided the lowest proposal. That's for a fixed sum. That was Giles Engineering Associates, $1,795. Intertech Professional Service Industries, $1,900. Partner Engineering and Science Inc., $2,250. Record Melky, $2,600, and no response or submittal from the Cigna Group. I will move to award a contract to and select Giles Engineering Associates as the consultant for Phase 1 environmental site assessments for the properties that were identified in the amount of $1,795.
I'll second it.
Okay, motion has been made and seconded. Discussion. All right, if there's no discussion, since you're ready to vote, does everybody understand the motion? All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes unanimously 4-0. Item 9, 9I then is going to be discussion, possible action on the appointment of the chairman of the Plan Commission member for the remainder of Brian Webb's term ending April 30th, 2021. There is no action to be taken on that tonight. That will be forthcoming in the near future. 9J, discussion possible action on Town Sanitary District Number 1, and the subpoints underneath that are to read the town's findings, make a formal determination, and sub 3 is to issue an order establishing the boundaries of Town of Waukesha Sanitary District number 1, Attorney Macy, are you going to guide us through that?
Certainly, you should have a letter September 23rd addressed to the administrator in this regard. So the town's findings, we just need to make sure that they're, that the findings have been reviewed by yourselves. I don't know whether it's necessary for me to actually read them to you out loud. If you want me to, I'd be happy to do so. You should have everybody have a copy.
Can I just interrupt you for a minute? I think that is a separate, it's not in the packet, it's a separate 3-page, some of that's back-to-back, but you should have had that at your desk tonight, is that correct?
That's correct.
You can find that, so it's not in the big packet?
Right, it was emailed to you on the 23rd
Right.
and, or
So,
24th, one of those.
Sorry
days.
for the interruption, go ahead.
No problem, no problem. So if you have it, why don't I just run through it? The petition
Please.
addressed to the town board of Waukesha County requesting the establishment of the town sanitary district of town of Waukesha, County, Wisconsin, unified with the clerk of the town of Waukesha, Waukesha, Wisconsin, on and before the meeting of the town of Waukesha Town Board held on August 22nd, 2019. Town board reviewed the petition, determined that the petition was signed by the owners of real estate as provided in section 60.71, parent 2, full parentheses, Wisconsin stats. On or about August 22nd, 2019, the town board set the bond amount for the petitioner filed regarding the matter at $10,000 and required the bond to be filed in the office of the town of Waukesha treasurer no later than August 28, 2019. The bond amount of $10,000 was filed prior to the August 28, 2019. Proper notice is required by law, including a class 2 notice is required by section 60.71, parent 4, full parent small b, full Wisconsin stats, and notice of the state of Wisconsin Department of Safety and Professional Services and the state Department of Natural Resources that was attended prior to the hearing. Town board held a public hearing regarding the creation of the sanitary district of 2019. Town of Waukesha receives sanitary sewer service from the city of Waukesha pursuant to the municipal agreement. It is necessary to monitor this service and manage the service, including financial management, and generally oversee the provision of service. This appropriate management will ensure that the sanitary service is provided to, and I believe that word should be users, residents, I don't know. Okay. Within the district in a manner provided by law, that changes are made to benefit the property in a manner provided law, and the changes are made to benefit the parties in a manner provided law, collected fairly and equitably, and will further ensure that the town of Waukesha satisfies its obligations to the city of Waukesha pursuant to intergovernmental agreement. Town board has carefully considered all testimony provided at the public hearing. Town board finds that the proposed words described in the petition is necessary, that the public health, safety, convenience, and welfare will be promoted by the establishment of the town sanitary district. Property included in the district will be benefited by the establishment of the district. So that is the read of the county findings. No adoption, no formal adoption of the findings is necessary, except in conjunction with adopting the order which follows on the.
So you have in that sequence, and tying it back off to the agenda, read the town findings, that's just what Attorney Macy did, those findings of facts. And then there's a determination statement and an order statement on the back of the document.
The determination is the town of Waukesha Town Board determines that all necessary procedures for the establishment of the town of Waukesha Sanitary District Number 1 have been followed, and sufficient grounds have been shown for the creation of the district, and hereby determines as an exercise of the town of Waukesha Town Board's legislative authority that sanitary district number 1 should be created. Again, as I note in the letter, top of page 2, it's not necessarily that we take any additional action on it. We just have to make this determination as part of the order.
And then, are you going to read the order in?
Certainly. So the order now therefore, it's an order that the town sanitary district is hereby organized. The corporate name of the district is the town of Waukesha Sanitary District Number 1 of the town of Waukesha, Waukesha County, Wisconsin. The boundaries of the sanitary districts are established as legally described in attached Exhibit A and as depicted in a sketch or map of the district territory shown in Exhibit B, which exhibits are attached hereto and incorporated herein by reference. It's further ordered pursuant to Wisconsin statute section 60.74, parent 1, close parentheses, that the town board hereby establishes itself as the commission to govern town of Waukesha sanitary district number 1. These findings of fact, determination, order adopted this blank day of blank 2019 upon a vote of in favor and blank opposed, then ultimately signed by the chairman if adopted and attested to by the town administrator, clerk, treasurer.
So would it be appropriate that if the board is inclined to act on this, the motion would be to accept the findings of fact and determination and adopt the order that's been put forth
Yes,
to
sir.
create the sanitary district number 1? Would that be the appropriate motion?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Anyone prepared to make such a motion? I'll make that motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Discussion? And I think the motion may be implied in there would be to direct the town chairman to sign the document. If there's no further discussion, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That passes unanimously 4-0.
And that needs to be so noted, as I say in my first paragraph, you need a 2/3 vote to designate the town board, and so we needed 4 of yourselves to so vote.
Understood.
So, we're good.
Okay, item 9K is discussion and possible action on 2018 3500 Ram DPW dump truck. You've got a bunch of information in your packet on that. This has been discussed multiple times at these town board meetings. Just a real quick summary of where we're at, as I understand that. I believe the truck that we purchased late last year is still over at Badger Truck Sales, or whatever the name of the entity is, over in West Dallas. Is that everybody's understanding? Is that correct?
That's correct.
Confirm that. You do have in your packet, and I know this was disseminated before, the vendor, there's a document in here, has offered to buy the vehicle back, and I think it refers to included with the plow. I know, Mike, you took it over there. Is it over there without the plow now? Is that the status of the way that went over there?
I couldn't tell you that I remember.
Okay. Well, at any rate, they've offered to buy that back for $40,000, I believe. You have 3 proposals in your packet, and Supervisor German might even be able to add a bit to that, but I believe DPW Director and he, and you can explain that, worked with Ewald Automotive Group to spec out, price out some replacement vehicles, and they offered proposals that included a trade-in price on that. I think you've got 3 of those. If you go back, you can separate those out. Am I correct that one of those is for a 2019 Ford Super Duty F350, and the third one is for a 2019 Dodge, I'm fumbling through these about as quickly as I can, 2020 Dodge Ram 3500. Supervisor German, do you have any more to enlighten us with?
They gave us 3 proposals. One was for, like you said, a 2020 and then 2019s. I spoke with Jerry, and Jerry really didn't matter to him which way to go. I believe the Ford was the cheapest priced that the Ewald Group gave us. I know the only thing that Jerry discussed with me was the gearing ratio of the rear end. We wanted to change that. Other than that, the Ford was set up pretty much the way he wants it.
So just a little bit, and then we can jump into discussion. I mean, we've got, a number of different ways that we could go on this. I think there's a recognition there that if we look to get a new vehicle, it's probably not going to be delivered and put into service during this winter season. Is that accurate? Or if it is, it would be late in the winter season. Is that accurate or not?
I believe they said about springtime.
Okay. I mean, clearly we've got some decisions to make as to whether to acquire a different vehicle, whether to trade in the existing one, attempt to sell it, auction it, whatever. I mean, we're kind of at the place where we have multiple decisions before us. Just the last thing, I talked to Jerry, and if the board were inclined to buy a new vehicle from Ewald, he actually told me he would prefer the Ford, and he also
Correct.
explained to me that he would want to look at revisiting, see if there's any other options for the rear end
Right.
ratioing. So, questions, thoughts? I'm not sure. Kathy, do you have anything further to add to that? You've got, just a quick one, I mean, you've got in your packet, you can see the proposal that was provided. I guess I'll call it a proposal, quotation, whatever you want to call it, goes back to June of last year, from which we acquired the existing vehicle. I'm running by it quickly. That was $53,000 some odd dollars. Do you have that right in front of you? $53,630. So they're willing to give $40,000 back. We paid $53,630, and I'm not sure, Mr. Borchert might even know, but we do have some, not a huge amount, but expense involved in putting lights on it, and Jerry made some modifications to do some welding reinforcement. So why don't you just come up for a real quick second and just share that information with it as to the things that the town did after we acquired it.
Yes, the lights that were added were a pair of yellow strobe lights in the rear of the vehicle and the one on top of the cab. Also, Jerry made side plates for the box to retain the salt onto it. It adds a little value to the vehicle. It wasn't an extensive amount that the town DPW department spent on it. So I don't know, I think you're just better off just cutting your losses or try and put it up for auction and see once. As you mentioned, we're not gonna have it for this season. We do have the older Ford 350, which would be a backup available, so.
Okay, thank you.
So, so today we need a couple questions answered. One, as Chairman stated, we got one offer for $40,000, and then Ewald offered in a trade-in $45,000. Are you, one, interested in purchasing a new vehicle and using it as a trade-in? I think that's your first question.
I think that's the only option we really have at this point. If we paid $53,000 for it, it probably depreciated $5,000 the minute it drove off the lot, as they say. And it's not gonna work for us. I mean, it's an asset sitting here not benefiting the town at all. So I'm against selling it back to them for $40,000.
Okay.
I don't think that's the route to go. I mean, I know, Dave, you talked to Ewald. Is there, I didn't get a chance to look at all the numbers. There's a lot here to digest in a short time here, but
Yeah, I think a trade-in of 45,000 would be,
I mean, is that in lieu of any discounts they gave you on top of that, or is that off the list price? Do you remember?
that was pretty much sight unseen. They just had pictures to go off of.
I mean, the list price of the Ford is what, 70, I forgot.
Well,
I
if
think
you,
they started with the state price,
if you look,
state contract.
they've
I
got,
know, but I mean, what is that? and how
here's
much
the
are
bottom
we-
line, they've got a quote worksheet. If you were to look at the 2020 Ford, which is even a little less than the 2019 for whatever reason, if you were to use that as framework you're looking at with base price destination options, they were at 74,851, okay? Then customer discount of 10,749. They were, and if that was sight unseen, although I think Jerry's been out there
Yeah.
previously with a vehicle, but they were offering a trade-in price of 45,000. If you crunch the numbers, the 74,851 less the customer discount of 10,749 less the trade-in of 45,000, it'd be net $19,102 to make that move. And it's 20 grand, 19, 20
I
grand.
think at this point, that's our best option. I mean, you get to take it to an auction and you may get 35,000, and I actually have a son that's in the excavating business and stuff, and they're kind of looking for a truck. He offered us 25, just off the top of his head. So I mean, you know, you never know what you're gonna get in an auction and what people are thinking, so I really think the 45, at this point, is our best option on a trade-in for the Ford.
Well, we have an offer for 40,000 without a trade-in. So if we're concerned that at auction it would only bring 25 to 35, I wouldn't see why we wouldn't take the offer for 40. I don't understand why we would trade this vehicle in and spend another, what, $8,000 so that we can get another 5,000 for the vehicle, when, number one, we have pretty much identified that we don't need the vehicle, because the DPW director said that if we don't get rid of it, he's never gonna use it anyway. He essentially didn't use it last winter, and the roads got plowed just fine. And number two, why we would spend this money now so that it could be delivered in April or May and promptly sit in a garage until November or December, when we have a whole bucket load of a wish list that we're gonna talk about shortly, that we ain't got no money to pay for.
That might be a good point, but then it sort of begs the question, if we don't need it, why did we buy it in the first place?
That's probably a good question to ask a previous board. But somebody kept talking the last time we talked about this, that we're moving forward. So let's move forward. I mean, we wanna go back and rehash it. We can look at the information that's provided here that talks about a 4x4 regular cab, 167.5 inch WB tradesman. I'm assuming WB is wheelbase. We can talk about the service order here to install the 11.4, is it? What was the size of the? Here, the 11 foot 4 inch by 94 inch steel dump body that nobody seems to know anything about. We can sit here and talk about, if we want to talk about the past, we can talk about the turning radius that's listed on page number 9 of 26.2 feet. What's the radius of our cul-de-sacs? Supervisor, or excuse me, Chairman? What's the typical radius of our cul-de-sacs?
I think it's 90 feet, isn't it?
So I don't understand how a vehicle with a 26.3 foot turning radius can't plow a 90-foot cul-de-sac. So I mean, if we want to talk about how we got here and why we bought it, we can, but I don't understand why we would spend this kind of money for something to sit in a garage for sure for 6 months.
Well, it wouldn't be sitting, they do need it for patching and chipping throughout the summer, and they do use the truck. But they've been
They
getting,
didn't use it this summer.
they've been getting by without it.
They got all kinds of trucks in there. How many, we got 2.5 DPW guys. We got trucks sitting around all over the place back there.
Well, we could also look at that at everything else then too. We have fire trucks sitting if they only take 2 out.
So what's the shortage of trucks that we have back there
It's not a shortage.
from this summer?
I didn't say it was a shortage, it's a truck that they do need.
To patch.
Chip, plow, salt.
So what vehicle did they use to patch this summer?
I don't know.
I mean, they can't chip and patch at the same time. Because we don't have that many DPW employees.
I understand that.
Okay. So that, I don't see a need to spend more money. Like I said, in another agenda item or two, we're gonna talk about all kinds of magical things that we have no money for.
Well, maybe we need to table this until Jerry is here, whether or not, again, there was, I'm just saying it observationally, there was apparently an urgency to do this last year, and maybe that has changed or otherwise. I mean, I guess an open question about that is even leaving that aside. I mean, this thing, right now, I think the conclusion is that this is it's not of useful value, it's not a useful asset to the town of Waukesha. I guess one of the questions that I would have, and I don't know whether anybody has pushed the issue a bit, but I mean, this thing has got, what, less than 1,000 miles on it or something? I mean, it's unused. We spent money to put lights on it and to fix the box, the salt thing. It's a little hard for me to believe that that went from $53,760 to $40,000. I mean, maybe the thing is to have somebody have a serious discussion with Badger Truck Sales, and if they think this thing is the best thing since sliced bread, you know, ask them if they'll come up with a bit more money. I mean, that's an incredible hit to take if this thing is so wonderful and great. I mean, do we know whether, and again, he's not here to ask, do we know whether Jim really asked the question to him, is this the best he can do? I mean, is he the one that solicited that price?
Correct.
Maybe we need to let this sit aside until Jerry and Jim are here and dig into that. I mean, I guess I'd like to even ask him whether he had a serious discussion. I mean, he's the contact on this, is whether that's the best somebody can do. I mean, I understand that it may not command full price, but I mean, that's an awful big hit for something that never even got used.
I'm fine with that, Mr. Chairman. I make a motion to table this then.
I'll second. Motion to table is not debatable, so we'll proceed to vote. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So that's unanimous. Would you, Madam Administrator, I mean, communicate to Supervisor Radke that I think we'd like to have him have a serious discussion with Badger Truck Sales or whatever his contact there, and see if they can't come up with something better than the $40,000 or give us an awful good reason why we'd have to take that kind of a hit for something that was never used. And it would be good to have a response to that in writing. Okay, anything else on that item? And we'll move on to 9L, discussion possible action on the 2020-24 capital project plan. Just a little bit of background information. The town board did have a workshop a week ago tonight, last Thursday on September 19th. That is, people weren't here, that was captured on YouTube, and we spent, I don't know, hour and 3/4, something like that, going through 2024 capital project plan, and you've got a document in the packet of where we landed at the end of the workshop. Is this something more?
So we'll start us on our next meeting as well. So what I gave you today is, we're gonna be talking in the next workshop, is the front page to the capital projects. And so the first one is the capital projects plan as you, or the projects plan as you discussed it on, at the last meeting, just as it sits. The second one, which some folded papers, we had a gentleman come in from Brooks Tractor Incorporated, give us an estimate on a new John Deere backhoe loader. And I'm sorry, on the top I said bucket truck, but that's because I made a mistake. So he gave us a cost of $82,995, and if you see it on your original capital projects, we had it slated on in 2021 for $125,000. He gave us a estimate for a trade-in value on our current truck of $17,000, which would bring our price down to $66,000, with a stabilizer would be under $70,000. What I put in front of you was, if you so choose, I showed you what the capital project plan might look like if we moved it from 2021. As we know that Director Noli stated that we have a leak in the current truck. It needs new tires, and we're looking at least a $10,000 maintenance or repair ahead of us. I'm concerned that since this is, as he mentioned, his bread and butter, his main tool he uses throughout the year, and we're coming up to the winter, if his bucket truck, or if his this truck goes down, I'd like to be sure that we could possibly have a new truck in 2020. Now, since we have nothing in 2020 right now, moving this truck to 2020 from 2021 would not increase extra money. It would actually decrease the cost that we had you had plugged in for 2021, and it would assure us that in 2020 we'd have a new truck. The gentleman, and I'm not stating that, by no means bringing this forward, this estimate forward or this quote forward from John Deere, am I stating, because I've learned from the past, bringing something forward and asking you to vote on a vehicle like this. But I did want to show you that our estimates were off on the truck, and appeal to you on getting this truck a year in advance. I think it's up to you, but what I wanted to show you was the budget on both sides of it, and show you what the what your capital project plan may look like, which is why I brought it now instead of at the workshop. Supervisor German happened to be in the office when the gentleman came in and kind of sat with us on going through what he was talking about. You might have something to help us on.
Not really. Jerry said that, or he stated that the hydraulics were starting to leak, and he was kind of concerned about fixing it this year, or getting a new one, or, he said the fixing it was about $10,000, I believe. So if we could move it ahead, the funds are there.
Is this tractor comparable to the one we got as far as size, and or
It's
is it
correct.
bigger?
It's same size.
Same size?
I guess I'll kind,
I can support this, I guess. It makes sense to me if putting $10,000 in an old tractor that's an old tractor already, yes. So I think it's prudent to do that.
It's a 1998, the one he has now.
I guess I'll defer to some of you on the hydraulics repair and all that type of thing. I think there's probably some better knowledge at the board here other than me.
I did want to also point out, Jerry thought it was interesting that this price came in for pretty much the same truck from that was bought by the board in '98, brand new, for $70,000, and it's only gone up at about $15,000 since 1998. So we just.
Well, that makes me feel really good tonight.
Makes me feel kind of bad, because I know farm tractors haven't done that. Gone up a lot more than that, so that's a pretty good deal, really.
Again, I mean, just an observation, this is a capital project plan. If we decide to do that, we need to adopt a capital budget which would cover that anticipated expense. I guess that said, that doesn't absolutely commit us to spending that money next year, but it's part of a plan or sense of direction. Is that fair?
Correct. We'll talk about the budget itself after you make the decision on what your capital plan will look like.
What's the pleasure of the board?
Well, the pleasure of this board member is to identify where the additional $3 million is gonna come from. That, I mean, we have $8.5 million of spending and anticipated revenues of $5.6 million. So that would be the pleasure of this board member, is to understand where the remaining $3 million is gonna come from over the next 5 years.
Well, I'm gonna jump into this thing. We've all said we don't want to raise taxes, we don't want to borrow money, but I think on a capital project such as this, if we go ahead with a new building and all that, I think if we can come up with some low-rate financing somewhere, I'm not against borrowing part of the money to put up a new building. Move ahead with some of the, I mean, nobody buys a house and pays cash, we all take a mortgage, so I think this is, be prudent to do this, and we can cash flow that out with our current tax rate. I think that'd be the direction to go.
I guess I'll just jump in. I think there are, to answer that question, there are options available. I mean, first of all, that is based on assumptions which might or might not come true. One of the biggest ones is whether going forward, whether we're able to transfer money from the operating fund to the capital fund as we have been doing for a number of years. I think it would be foolhardy to put any significant reliance on that. I know the expense and revenue model stuff that I put together back in July, because that's something that this town board had never even looked at, was predicated on $100,000 transfer. That's significantly below what we've historically done. Unless for 5 years, I wouldn't be comfortable depending on something more than that as an assumption, although that might come true. I mean, projects that are on this list, the capital plan, I mean, future boards will have to balance capital income and expense budgets on a yearly basis. They'll have to revisit the capital plan every time they go through it. There are, I think, options downstream for changing priorities, deferring projects, belt tightening, borrowing. Again, that wouldn't be my first choice, but if money is relatively cheap at this point in time, that might be something worthy of discussion. There's certainly the opportunity to raise revenue limits. Again, I don't look on that enthusiastically, but I think there are a lot of options downstream that can be looked at, so I'm comfortable with proceeding with a capital project plan. I mean, the ones we've approved in years past, the expenditures that we were going to do on this property for the fire station, the public works building and everything, we didn't have a revenue stream to support that anyway, and I'm not offering that as a defense, but we
That's not
simply
true.
didn't. No, it is true.
We
So
had
that's my point
close
of view.
revenue streams to the expenditures that we were going to make.
We never even looked at a revenue stream, so.
That is just categorically not true. So, okay. So we got 2 for borrowing.
I didn't necessarily say that. I said that's an option or a possibility to consider downstream, one option of a number of options. Anybody else want to jump in or say anything more? Are you prepared to take action on this tonight? I mean, we mentioned we need to approve a capital project plan tonight. We have to do that. We have a workshop which is going to commence as soon as we are done with this regularly scheduled board meeting. Hopefully at that point in time we can get our arms around a capital budget for 2020, because that has to be in place, that has to be advertised by the 14th of October, and we have an operating budget to put together. That may be slightly off topic, but it underscores the need to move on this tonight. I know Kathy was even going to suggest we might do that operating budget thing perhaps Monday night, in as much as the joint public hearing with the town of Vernon is not going to take place. So I know that's a bit off topic, but there is urgency that we have to adopt a capital project plan tonight, or we're simply not going to be able to move forward and get to the deadlines we need to meet. Is that fair? Okay.
So what capital budget plan are we talking about now? The one that Kathy just presented with the tractor change on here, or are we gonna work on the one that we did at the workshop?
Well, I guess that's open to suggestion, and we could put one or the other forth in the form of a motion. That's just exactly what we're about.
Okay, I would make a motion to approve the capital budget plan the way Kathy presented it, with the addition of the tractor being moved up.
Okay, and then to be sure on that, that would change the, I want to make sure I do this correctly, change the, from the thing that was in our packets, the place we ended up a week ago, Thursday night, that takes the total in the capital project plan for 2020 from $787,800 to $857,800, and 2021 it reduces in the capital project plan the total yearly expenditure from $685,000 to $560. Did I summarize that correctly?
Correct.
All right, so that's what your motion is going for. The capital project plan for 2020 through 2024 is $857,800, $560,000, $3,310,000, $1,388,000, $2,350,000. That's indeed the motion?
Yes.
Okay, I will second the motion. Discussion. Okay, if there's no further discussion, the motion was made by Supervisor Stigler, seconded by Chairman Fisher, to adopt a 2020 through 2024 capital project plan as it was included in the packet and included with the agenda, with the exception of moving the backhoe expenditure, which is item 2018-5, which was originally in at $125,000 for 2021, and moving it to $70,000 in 2020. That's the motion. All in favor indicate by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Opposed.
So we have 3 in favor, Supervisor German, Supervisor Stigler, Chairman Fisher, 1 opposed, Supervisor Durr. Okay, then we are at item 10, which is announced closed session number 2. You are hereby notified that the town board of the town of Waukesha shall convene and may upon motion duly made and seconded and acted upon by roll call vote as required under Wisconsin Stats 1985 1G. Going to closed session during the course of the meeting, the town board members may attend the closed session. The purpose of the closed session will be as follows: to confer with legal counsel for the governmental body who is rendering oral or written advice concerning strategy to be adopted by the body with respect to litigation which it is or is likely to become involved. Specifically discuss Scott Voigt, non-compliant properties located on Harris Highland and Genesee Road, and Mr. Sandoval Regalado, non-compliant property located at W262 South 3333 Ridge Road. Is there a motion to go into closed session for that purpose?
I'll make a motion, we go into closed session.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion by Supervisor German, seconded by Supervisor Stigler to go into closed session. All in favor will respond by roll call vote.
Supervisor German.
Aye.
Supervisor Stigler.
Aye.
Supervisor Durr.
Aye.
Chairman Fisher.
Aye. We are in closed session for the second and final time this evening at 9:23 p.m. on Thursday, September 26, 2019.
Yeah, but then you got a trade-in value of 17,000 on the old one. Okay, so it brings it down.
Because this was 125.
Yeah, but it's gotta be next year, 2020 for the,
I know, we
Okay.
all for sure.
yeah, okay.
And
So
so
they,
it's down to 560,
yeah, but the original figure they had was too high.
was 125 is too high. So it's 70,000.
My understanding was 70,000 and less 17,000 for trade-in.
Oh,
But he also, okay, he got puts culverts in, he's gotta have that for that.
mhm,
And he does tree work, then we use it on that for tree work also. Because not only is the bucket this way, but the bucket opens up this way. So if he wants to pick up big pieces of wood, it goes like this, and then he clamps it in, dumps it in the truck, and then we bring it back and all the other stuff.
yeah, there's some Town Board Road, and there are big logs that have been sitting
But
for a
then-
tree.
Mike said, well, they can only use one truck at a time. Before they used that, Jerry's got it set up for trees. Now he's gotta take everything off and use it for asphalt, and switch back and forth. It's not a new truck either, we've had issues with that. The Ford 350 out there. And this stuff isn't gonna last forever.
Of course, yeah.
Chief knows that.
Just,
So I'm gonna get out of here. Bad enough
I
fun.
think I probably will too. Except this sounds like what they're gonna do now is not gonna take very long.
They need to sit out and put Jerry in here too, and we'll talk to them about that stuff, so.
Alrighty.
No, they've heard it already. They're not listening.
Pardon?
They've heard it all already. They're
I know, it's like, they're beating a dead horse.
They're not listening.
And then, okay, yeah, you're gonna take a hit on another truck, but Jerry didn't use that, we didn't use that truck last year because it didn't.
Somebody called the truck that they should have bought. Somebody called the truck they should have bought. That's what.
Oh, yeah, but they don't wanna admit it. And Mike Dorf was on board when they bought it. Sure. Okay, you're one of the guys that signed for it. So, question, what, pancake breakfast? Need extra help?
Sure, if you want to come and help, that'd be great.
Okay.
Sure. We'll take all help we can get.
You're a good guy, Sid.
So,
I wish I could be there, but I had signed up for the
you
other
got people,
before I
other
was
people
there.
flip the pancakes, or whatever, or like?
Yeah.
I got a lot of experience in that.
Oh, we have a company that we hired that does.
Yeah, but they come in and, so just the people that serve the stuff. and-
Serve.
Anyway, I've been there
Clean
before.
up.
I wasn't there last year because I went on a fishing trip on Mississippi with the fishing club, and that was a waste of time, and they're going again this year. They asked me, well, I ain't going this time. I said, you gotta be kidding me. You know, it was just time and driving all the way to the other side of the state, and it's just like, wasn't my cup of tea, so.
Friend of ours from church just came back, they went up to Canada fishing last week.
Oh, well, I've been going to Canada for lots of,
They have a lot of fun there, on some walnuts.
yeah, where did they?
I don't know.
Yeah. We've been doing drive-in, although, I mean, I've done fly-ins, it's been, 30 years from the first time I went up there and all that stuff. But, we've been doing drive-ins, the wife goes along, the dog, take the dog along, all that stuff. Anyways, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's, but I like having my own boat too, so. What kind of time frame are we looking at?
We start serving at 7,
Yeah, so
so,
anytime in there?
yeah, just 6:45 or something, if you
Yeah.
want to get here right at the beginning,
Okay, well,
somewhere.
I live far away, so I mean, if I leave home at 6:30, I'm here in 10 minutes.
Plenty early. Plenty early.
So,
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Great. We appreciate the help.
yeah, I know. So, there is it, so. I don't know who else, the supervisors all gonna be there, or,
Who knows?
oh, you don't know?
They
You don't
haven't
have,
said,
you don't have a list?
they haven't said if they're coming or not.
Hmm?
They haven't said if they're coming or not.
So you don't even know who's gonna be there? or what?
Well, the fire department won't be there.
Oh,
After.
okay, okay.
After,
All right,
like the supervisors.
No,
okay.
They come.
Mike comes
Sometimes, yeah.
sometimes.
Brian
This is
usually
part of
comes.
it.
Yeah, I know, he was there.
And Brian was there also,
Yeah.
so.
All right,
I think those were the only 2 that came last year.
I'll come in uniform food. I'll come in uniform.
Hey, that works.
Mm,
That works.
Union
I
guy.
was surprised Jerry wasn't here tonight, and I texted Paul, I texted Jerry, nobody answered.
Surprised too.
Huh?
I'm surprised too, since the truck
He's
was
always
on.
using, because of the report.
Well, because the truck was on there, I thought you.
Well, yeah, and that's why I was sticking around to find out what's going on with that, and it's like,
Well, and because of the budget, I thought you'd be here.
but I don't, okay, Ewald wants to give him 45, which is pretty decent, okay? But then why is the other one costing another 19,000 more? That's what I don't, Jerry's on top of this, I know.
No idea.
I know.
what they-
I gotta talk to him tomorrow.
I don't know what they did out.
Hmm?
I don't know what they did out. I mean,
Well, I know they spec'd it out with Ewald, and they got a special computer system, you can spec it out in 20 minutes and print everything out you need, it's
oh,
really.
it's the state bid list, it's simple.
Yeah,
You got, Jerry could do it sitting in his office here if he wants to. I mean, he doesn't even have to go out to Ewald to do it, it's online,
Well, I
anybody
don't,
can
he's
do
not
it.
too computer.
I mean, anybody can do it, but, you know, it depends what they put on it.
Right, right.
You know, that's, I don't know what they put on there, you know. They
Well-
said the truck spec'd out at 74,000 or something. I mean, that's 20 grand more than what there's no truck spec'd out.
Now, when they bought the new trucks last year, and I don't know what brand you prefer, and that's fine, I'm a Chevy person, all right?
Typically, they buy the low bid truck here.
And I asked Jim Ranfield, I said, why did you buy the Dodges? Because they were cheapest. I said, I know they're a cheap truck, but, I was like,
Well, that's the truck they just bought for me this year. It's gonna be a Dodge, because that was low bid.
But the thing is, while we're in, if a regular pickup, that's fine, like the pickup truck that three-quarter ton they got, all right? Well, it says three-quarter ton, but those front ends are so frickin' soft on there. What, I showed Gary, I said, you watch this, sitting there in the garage, all right, and I lift the plow up, that front end dropped 2 inches.
That's because they didn't bid it with a snowplow package on, that's why.
Exactly.
That's why. They build trucks today to ride like a Cadillac, because that's what everybody wants.
Right.
People don't use them for work anymore. I mean, when you see a lady in her high heels go and climb in this truck and drive away, and you think she's going to work?
And the thing
Come
is,
on.
the tires, they came with, were straight highway tires.
Yeah, because that's what they bid.
Not even for a four-wheel drive truck.
See,
So I said,
that's
Jerry,
what I said, that's why, same thing with the truck. If they put those things on there, it's gonna drive the price up.
right,
That's the whole difference, because I don't know what they did with the original truck, which obviously wasn't right, and what they're gonna miss.
I told Jerry, I said, I got a real simple solution for your front end. I've used them for years. It's made Timbren is the name of the company. And what it is they make it for any size truck, I mean, even for fire trucks. And they're different rubber cushions for front and rear. I went and got it, I bought them for under $200 for the pair. And Jerry will put them in. And so all we did is pop the tire up, knock Nolan out. Both of them were on in less than 30 minutes, I had it done. And guess what? Now, how much that front end drops now? 3/4 of an inch. Because it's set up for it now.
That's the whole problem, is why.
Yeah.
That's the whole problem. When we won the tender 2 years ago, we went through the whole thing. Mary thought we just went to a car dealership and bought one. That's not how it works. And then he was all upset because we put stuff in there like, why'd you specify a rubber floor mat? Well, if you don't, you get a steel painted floor. You know what that's gonna be like in the wintertime or when it's raining out? I said that drive will skate right across the truck and out the other side.
Yeah.
It's gonna be too slippery. Yeah, it'll be too slippery.
I mean,
Oh, that was great.
I bought, I got my truck, 3 years old. Right, right.
All right, we are back in open session at 9:34 PM on Thursday, September 26, 2019. We're at item 11 on the agenda, which is a discussion of possible action on Scott Voigt non-compliant property. I believe there's no action to be taken on that item. Item 12 is discussion, possible action on Mr. Sandoval Regalado non-compliant property.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to take action as discussed in closed session for the non-compliance property in Mr. Sandoval Regalado.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second it.
Any discussion? Assuming not, all in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that passes unanimously. We are at item 13, accounts payable, authorized payment of the bills. We have 2 sets of bills to pay. First one would be the Roykert Milky bill in the amount of $28,928.17. Is there a motion to pay that bill?
I'll make a motion to pay the Rookert Milky bill.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Supervisor German, second by Supervisor Stigler, to to authorize payment of the record Milky bill in the amount of $28,928.17. Roll call vote, please.
Supervisor Durr?
Aye.
Supervisor German?
Aye.
Supervisor Stigler?
Aye.
Chairman Fisher?
I abstain. And then finally, a motion would be in order to pay the remainder of the accounts payable bills in the amount of $23,332.22. Is there a motion to that effect?
I'll make the motion to pay the bills in the amount of $23,332.22.
Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Okay, motion by Supervisor Stigler, second by Supervisor German to authorize payment of the remainder of the accounts payable bills in the amount of $23,332.22. Is there any discussion? A roll call vote, please.
Chairman Fisher?
Aye.
Supervisor Durr?
Aye.
Supervisor German?
Aye.
Supervisor Stigler?
Aye.
Okay, and we are at that point in time that a motion to adjourn would be in order.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I will second, so the motion is by Supervisor Stigler, second by Chairman Fisher to adjourn the meeting. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Nay. That passed unanimously. We are adjourned at 9:37 p.m. We will proceed with our workshop. Are you going to put this on a separate YouTube production, or what do we need to do? Yes, okay, so this is a Town Board of the Town of Waukesha on Thursday, September 26, 2019. And at 9:38 p.m., we are going to begin a workshop talking about budgets for 2020. Again, it's a workshop. We'll have open discussion. There'll be no action taken, and this proceeding will be recorded on the Town of Waukesha YouTube channel. Administrator Nicholas, you want to start us off?
Sure. Let's start on the capital budget with the change that was made during the last board meeting. I've highlighted where the change would actually affect in the 2020 proposal. The general property tax revenue I kept at $400,000. Another revenue is our interest income. I set at $6,000. That's this what I'm expecting the year end to be this year. I put in the $100,000 transfer from general fund as you had indicated for revenue during the capital project discussion. The fund balance applied would be $351,800. And our expenditures would be government outlay of $347,800. And if you take a look at your project plan, this mirrors the project plan. So that's the property that you're purchasing at $347,800, sorry. And then the public safety capital outlay for $190,000, which encompasses the fire truck, or grass fire truck, and $40,000 toward the new fire station. The public works outlay of $320,000, which is $250,000 in roads, and the $70,000 for the backhoe. So the way I made sure that it fell in as a zero balance, so our revenues and our expenditures balance at zero, was by using fund balance at that $351,800. Any questions?
Yeah, I have one or two questions, and maybe we've done this as a precedent before, but is it appropriate, do we actually budget for an anticipated transfer from the general fund at $100,000? Is that, we've done in the past, is that appropriate to budget for anticipation of that or not?
I don't agree with budgeting for a transfer from the general fund with the anticipation that we did not, that we overestimated our general fund budget. It's what happened in the past. We've always transferred from the general fund. That transfer is usually not budgeted. I put the $100,000 in because you used it as a revenue during the discussion. So that's up to you. If you would like to take that $100,000 out, we would just use fund balance applied at $451,800.
Yeah, I guess my inclination would be that that should not be in there for budgeting purposes. What does anybody else think? Do you have any opinion on that, Attorney Macy?
Oh, I'm sorry. I wasn't
Whether or
ready
not,
to-
no, the question is, and other people
I
thinking
was
about it.
going to leave, but I'm sorry.
No, I mean, just as long as you're here, but for budgeting, for the capital budget thing, I mean, when we did some of these revenue stream projections and stuff, we put something in, but for budgeting purpose, I raised the question, I'm personally not comfortable with budgeting a transfer from the general fund that might or might not happen. Do you have any, or anybody else on the board, anybody have any thoughts on that? My inclination
I
is
do
not
have
to
a thought
put
on
that
it
in there.
Because my feeling is you should budget your best estimate of what you're going to spend. So you don't have, so you're fully disclosing to your, if you have a budget to spend X amount of 1 million, whatever, and the way you're going to fund those is to transfer from the general fund, I think you should. Now, some people don't even budget capital. They just move it, at time. I think it's much better to have a separate capital budget as part of the process. And I'm sorry, I didn't hear any discussion, so I'm not taking sides because I was writing our prosecutor with that note, so Kathy we would get that done.
And fair enough, we were just diving into it, I guess, the other way, and Kathy just did it, I mean, is that you basically, take funds there, I mean, you bump the 320 to 420, and for budgeting purposes, you make no reliance on a potential transfer.
And then where does the money come to? Where does the
It basically, this public works capital outlay, it comes from fund reserves. It comes from a fund balance within the capital fund that currently exists.
Oh, okay. Well, but I guess can I give a little example?
Yeah.
In the old days, before people did a lot of borrowing, things like that, if they were gonna save up for a fire truck, they would put away $100,000 a year, right? And it's a $500,000 fire truck. So what they would do is they'd budget $100,000, and they wouldn't spend it. It would fall to the general fund, and the next year they'd budget $200,000, only levying for another $100,000 and moving $100,000 from the general fund. Does that make sense? And so you would always show that transfer to show that you're potentially gonna spend the $200,000 and till you get up to your $500,000 or you decide you're gonna buy the fire truck. I think that's truth to the citizen of what's going on. Be it a fire truck or be it a squad car, a capital thing. Now, I think boards like yourselves have become more sophisticated, and so you do a capital budget, but the capital budget should balance also. And if the only way you get your capital budget to balance is to show I'm going to take money out of general fund, honestly, that's what you should show. If it's all gonna come out of your capital fund, then you don't have to show it. Or if you think it's all gonna come out of capital fund, and then you decide later to move it from the general fund, which maybe that's what Kathy was saying. As I said, I only was half listening because I was writing that note to Christopher and trying to get out of your hair. But I don't think there's a wrong way, but I think you always err on the side of giving the most information to the citizenry.
Okay.
I think it's problematic for me when a board, I have one client, I'm not gonna tell you who pays, they never budget for street work. till they see how the year's going, and then they decide they're gonna spend $300,000 on street work. They go out for the bids, and they come back, and then they say, and then they move it from the general fund with the budget amendment for $300,000 for street work. I've always felt that that's a little misleading to the citizenry from the November public hearing. You know, it's not illegal, you know.
Okay.
So the way this budget is set
Am I
up,
excused, Mr.
Thank you.
Chairman?
You're good to go.
Sorry
Thank
to stick my
thank you,
nose.
Attorney Mason.
So,
No, that's fine. I asked you.
if you look at this, this budget as we're taking 100,000 out of general fund, it would be saying that we're gonna take that $100,000 out in January. Not that we're waiting until we see we have 100,000 lapse from the year before. That's still possible. I only put the $100,000 in because that was your model. I have no problem moving that to the, reducing it to zero, the transfer from general fund, and then increasing our fund balance applied to $451,800.
Okay, yeah. Do you have a preference?
I would prefer to do the latter.
Okay, to strike the 100 and make it the 451.8.
I would, yes.
That'd be my preference as well, but we need the rest of you to weigh in on that.
I'm
David?
fine with that also.
Okay, so let's do that, then that'll be the 451.8, and the transfer from the general fund drops to zero. What's the other question I get is the 3,712,124.22, what's that?
I was just doing. That was across the board. I was just doing
Okay,
some
so that doesn't mean-
comparisons when I was doing it.
That doesn't mean anything to us.
Yeah,
at
that's
this
why it
point.
wasn't in the box. Apologize.
Okay, other discussion on the capital budget to support the capital plan.
All right, so.
Okay, that, just a real quick, once we do that, are we, then there will be, on the capital budget, there'll be no further discussion, no further action. This is what you will advance when this is published, is that right, on the 14th of August? And actually, the adoption of that will fall to the 5th of November, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, everybody understand that? We won't be discussing, this is it, we won't be discussing capital budget anymore. This is what's going to be published, and on the 5th of November, the electorate has to approve the tax levy so that it'll support the $400,000 that goes in here out of the tax levy, and then the town board will act on the capital budget on the 5th of November.
That's
right?
correct.
Okay, what's next?
So the next budget we're going to be looking at is the fire inspection budget. That's $240.
Have you got a copy of this?
I did.
Or if we got an extra one,
I do.
come on up.
I brought one for him. Stuff out there. Okay, so what I did go through this with Chief, and I got his expected year end as well as his proposed budget. If he'd like to speak on it, he could do that. Or I can just move forward. The revenue, I kept the revenue the same as I did in 2019. I'll talk about the revenue. As we get that money from our 2%. Right, I got it. Of 29,677.79. So I rounded that to the 39,600 for next year, the proposed budget. I also, they have an amount of $76,434.63 left in their fund balance. They have the ability to use that fund balance if they decided to buy something with that. The reason I put it in here is, one, we can keep track of what the fund balance is. This can't be applied to anything other than inspection and prevention. It's my understanding. We do use that at the beginning of the year because the fire dues does not come in right away. And so we use some of his fund balance during the time that we're waiting for the 2% to come in. And and then it drops off and the rest of it goes into capital, or goes into fund balance for the 240 account. When it comes to wages, Chairman, you want to start there? I mean, Chief, you want to start there?
Wages is a combination of a portion of full-time fire inspectors' pay. I didn't bring those numbers in here with me, but I want to say it's the same as it was this year. And then what we paid on-call personnel to do fire prevention programs and help with inspection work or whatever. So that's a combination of those wages that go into that.
And so I break down the FICA and the retirement, because the retirement isn't dollar for dollar because it's some of the people that do the prevention and the inspection that are on-call fire members are not in WRS. The health and dental benefits only come from the full-time fire inspector and not our on-call people as well. So the same percentage that is used in the budget of our full-time fire, say the percentage is 25% of his time goes to inspection. I do the same thing with his dental as well, and his wages. So they're paid out of his inspection account. Contracted services.
Contracted services are things like when we need computer help or we need code interpretations, things like that comes out of contracted services.
Membership and dues and training.
Is exactly what it is. It pays for our memberships for NFPA codes, training for inspections and fire prevention programs, and membership to the Wisconsin Fire Inspectors Association.
Are you expecting a increase in that? I mean, looking at the 19 budget was 4,600. You're proposing 4,200, but we've only expecting to use 2,200 this year and 1,400 the year before. So the increase?
That's because we did not attend the spring conference. Neither I went nor the inspector went, and that's the biggest drop out of there. We didn't attend that conference at all.
Okay. Printing supplies and expenses.
Supplies and expenses pays for all of the materials we use for fire prevention programs, props that we use for fire inspection programs and such all comes out of there.
Okay. And so we just under budgeted last year? Is that what happened there?
Yeah, we bought some unexpected props that we used one time. When we did our side-by-side burn, we had some props that we purchased for that.
Okay. All right, so last year I had it, put his fund balance down in the possible expense of a capital outlay. I didn't do that this year. He didn't say he was looking at anything. Last year they were thinking about maybe a smokehouse or something. So we popped it down there, so if he wanted to use it, he could. if he has a project that he's going to use and we have to change the budget, at that time, he'll come and bring that forward. Any questions?
Yeah.
Help me out just a bit, does this not, this budget doesn't need to balance revenues and expenses? Or am I missing something? I mean, is the revenues the 39,600 and the $76,000, and the expenses are 44,680? Do the revenues and expenses not need to balance?
We carry that fund balance that we carry is $76,000. That's why it doesn't balance, because we can use that money. In fact, we have to use that money for fire inspection stuff. And it's the only thing it can be used for. And by law, it has to be rolled over. So if we don't use it, it gets rolled over and we have to sit on it in a pot.
So it's a fund balance, but the net effect is, if you follow this budget, you're expecting to expend the 44,618.80 less the 39,600, which is what, $5,000 or something like that out of that fund balance. Is that
Correct.
it?
Right.
Correct.
So I can balance that easily by putting the rest of the fund balance in the capital outlay.
Okay.
So if he does want to use it, he does not have to come back to the board.
Okay.
It might be an easier way to show it too, so when we
So
do
then it's
our
a zero
audit.
balance?
Yeah, well, and then when we do our audit for the
It's always
state,
there.
it shows it, yeah.
Okay.
And this has to, not unlike the capital, and when we get the operating, this has to be published by the 14th of October.
That's right.
And this will be a separate action on November 5th then to adopt the 240 fire inspection budget. Is that it?
That's correct.
Okay.
So I have one other budget, if you're all okay with this one. Did you have any other questions on the fire
Anybody else?
inspection budget? Okay, so I have one very small budget. I'm not even giving you a piece of paper for it. It's our debt budget. So our debt is, we pay our debt from the county. Our current yearly payment is $27.57. So we take that out of tax revenue, $2,757, and we expense it by paying the county the $2,757. That is also a budget, the debt budget, that I need to place in the paper.
And does that run one more year?
Runs
I
a
mean,
couple-
4 more years?
Yes.
Something like that? Okay. Any questions about that? Can I just double back to one other thing, but back to the capital budget? I thought we were, and part of the revenue stream thing put together was to take our road aids into the capital budget instead of the operating budget. Was I misinformed on that? I thought
Well, I think we
we were talking about doing that.
I did talk about doing that, but then when you put your revenue layout, you didn't put the transportation aids in, so I kept the transportation aids in the.
I think we did, and you may have to look at the operating budget, see how that works. Look at the revenue thing, though. I thought we put in $140,000 for the road aids. Have you got a
I-
copy of that handy or not?
I don't. I do, if you'd like me to use the road aids here, I can do that. We just have to remember that we're going to be
Well, that's gonna be cutting against the
cutting
operating
against the
thing.
operating budget.
We may have to, can we say that, can we maybe, when we look at the operating thing, we may need to revisit that? I mean, that may appropriately be long on the capital side rather than the operating side, but then if that money is there, and I think bump that a bit, wasn't that this past year like 127 or something like that? And I thought they were talking about 8% increase. Do we have that number yet or no?
I do have the number, and it's not as big as we were hoping.
Hasn't bumped up as much, okay. Can we just leave it that we may need to revisit that when we look at the operating budget? We may need to take a peek back at the capital budget again. Is that
Absolutely.
okay with everybody? Is everybody good to do operating budget Monday night at 6:30? And again, we may have to peek backwards into the capital one. Is everybody good for that workshop right here then? Yes, on the 30th. That was gonna be the hearing. Cooperative agreement or boundary agreement with Vernon is not gonna take place. So we're gonna be here, but instead of that, we'll do the operating budget workshop. Is everybody okay with that? Okay, then, if there is nothing else, we're done with the budget workshops at 10:01 on Thursday.